Since the release of sim update number 3, people are reporting issues with the main thread which keeps increasing and sometimes also is affecting other things. In this video we're gonna look at the first two builds of sim update number 4 beta, and we're gonna look at the main thread but also the frames per second performance when using Flight Simulator using the Fenix A320. But first, let's roll the intro. So we're taking off from Belfast airport using the Fenix A320. It's a realistic aircraft, but also a more heavier aircraft. I'm using the Xbox controller to control the aircraft, so that's why you would likely see some alerts. So now if we keep an eye on the main thread, you can see it's already in a yellow zone, closely to between 25 and 30 milliseconds. And if you look at the frames per second, it's roughly 75-ish, which is, I think, still pretty good. Now, what we will do is we will do a longer flight, but of course I won't record the full flight. At least I've recorded completely, but I've made some, let's say, jumps in the flight, because else it will be a very lengthy video. You can see that currently there's some alerts due to the fact that I'm overspeeding, so I will decrease the speed a bit. So let me find out how to do that using the Xbox controller. It's kind of funny to control the Fenix A320. Definitely won't recommend you to use that. But you can still, the frames per second are climbing and the main thread is, let's say, also decreasing, which is, I'd say, good, because that was one of the main complaints of the sim update number 3, is that the main thread will increase continuously, which eventually causes some serious issues. So we made a small jump in the flight and we're still climbing to the target flight level of flight level 350. You can see that now we're further away from the airport, so more airborne. I would say you can see that the main thread decreases massively, is now roughly around 15, and it's in the green area zone. You can still see some yellow, I would say, warning signs, and you can see that the frames per second has massively increased, right? So I would say above 120, which is, I would say, massively. Now if we would jump any further in the video, which I will do in a few seconds, you will see that if we're, say, closely above the land, where more details are being added, you will see some, let's say, small changes also there. But it looks like the main thread issue is fixed, because what I saw on the forums is that continues to increase no matter where you're flying, but looks like it has improved a little bit now in this first beta build. So we're closely to the UK, right? So we made a jump from Ireland to the UK with the flight, and we're now en route, right? So we're at the flight level which is assigned to us, and you can still see that the main thread is, I would say, kind of positive, right? So not a lot of things are changing. You can see that it, let's say, increased a bit, but still the frames per second is really good. What you will see is, if we would skip further in this part of the video, where we will see more details on the, I would say, on the scenery, that we'll likely see some increased main thread and likely see decreasing the frames per second. But overall it still is, I would say, good enough, I would say. So still no main issues with the main thread, which is good. So as soon as I completed recording this video, well, you can already guess what happened. Then there was that new beta release. So let's do the same test with the latest beta build, which is the second beta build at this moment. So we're doing the same test, right? Using the Fenix A320 takeoff, but then using the latest build at this moment, which is build 1650. Really interesting to see. We still see the main thread is all kind of yellowish, but we do see that the frames per second is a little bit higher. Might have to do with the, I would say, density of the AI traffic. You can see that the weather is also not completely the same. There are some clouds. I even tested with a lot of rain in both versions, and then it still performs pretty well. So that was also something which was pleasantly surprising me. So now you can see we're taking off, right? We're switching on the autopilot, and then everything is still okay-ish. We're making the turn left, and you can see that the main thread already starts to decrease, and the frames per second is slightly increasing, although I do think that the frames per second was a little bit higher compared to the first build of sim update number 4 beta. The other thing is that you see that the HC window is completely broken, but hey, that likely is an issue, but hey, it's a beta, so we shouldn't complain. Now let's make a jump to the next part of the flight. So we're still climbing, but you can see that the weather is a little bit different than the first video, which likely also is affecting the frames per second, because the frames per second was in the first build roughly 20 frames per second higher. You can also see that the main thread here is still in the yellow zone, whereas in the previous video it was going to the green zone. Also likely the AC opening and closing also doesn't help a lot, as you can see. But no matter what, I do think that the first build of the beta was better performing than the second build. However, it still is not bad. So let's jump a little bit further in the video, in the flight, to see if it improves, yes or no. So we're close to the airport, and you can see that we're flying during the night, which also is using the lights on the ground of the city, which makes it more challenging. You can see that the frames per second is still, let's say, roughly 100, and the main thread is in the yellow zone. It's between 90 and 20, sometimes a little bit higher. Not too, let's say, concerning, and you can see that the, let's say, aircraft is performing pretty well, but also the view is looking, I would say, amazing. But what happens if we're coming closer to the airport and then landing on the airport? Let's see. And now of course comes the most challenging part, and I know what you're all gonna say: how can you approach an airport like this? Well, something went really wrong, which resulted in that I was almost, let's say, bypassing the airport, but then I will still be able to, let's say, kind of correct the flight a bit. I know that this is far from the optimal, let's say, landing, which you should do normally, but I was simply wondering what the performance will be. You can see that the frames per second is dropping. You can also see that the main thread is increasing again. So the thing which I want to test out here is, okay, how will it perform, but also what will be the effect if we're coming closer to the airport, because in previous versions of Flight Simulator 2024, like sim update number 3 and before that, you were experiencing a lot of performance issues when enclosing to an airport. Of course, this is not a really busy airport, but I was still wondering how it went. You can still see that the main thread is climbing closer to the 30s again, and frames is dropping to roughly 70. Now the flight is being done by the autopilot. For some reason it's going far to the right on the runway, so also you will see that I need to do a lot of manual corrections once I've landed on the runway, because I needed to control, of course, the video and some other things to make sure that it's working correctly. And also keeping my eye, I would say, on the length of this video, because I didn't want to make it too long, which I think it already is, but hey, sorry for that. So keeping an eye on the frames per second and the main thread, you can see that the frames per second is pretty stable, right? We're using the Fenix A320 here, which is, let's say, kind of one of the heavier aircrafts because of third-party one. You can see some micro stutters happening now, but it's not as bad as it was, I would say, in previous versions of Flight Simulator, I would say, based on my testing. You can still see that the main thread is climbing a little bit, but not too bad. You can see some red peaks there. There, I would say, kind of, let's say, worrying, but it's not continuously red, right? So that's, I would say, good news. So what can we conclude based on this? Well, this is still the beta, right? So we can't take any conclusions. However, the first beta build looks like to be much better than the second one, performance-wise. That's also what I read on the fora, right? Flight Simulator, that the second build is, I would say, less performing than the first build. But maybe the third build is again great, right? We don't know. For now, we will end this video where we tested multiple scenarios. I hope you liked it. If you got any comments or feedback, then feel free to put them in the notes below this video. And I hope to see you back next time.